Hey everyone, Professor Wells again. We are now exploring composition, and yes, it has its own set of elements that we need to consider as well. What I hope to do is introduce them to you through a series of art and architecture examples and cover them all in one short video mini lecture. So here we go. Let's pivot to the PowerPoints. All right, here we are looking at a couple of examples. We're going to begin on the left. As you have read on our content page, composition has several formal elements that make up its arrangement or composition. They are balance, rhythm, proportion and scale, and emphasis. We are going to begin with balance by taking a look at two examples, one symmetrical on the left and one asymmetrical on the right. So what we find with balance is that when elements in a composition, as seen with the Chilkat blanket made by the Chilkat people associated with the Tlingit people of Alaska and Canada in the northwest part of North America, you have an example of elements that are evenly distributed in a way that there is symmetry. There is a central focus and then a balance of elements on the left and the right. So in this part of the world, this kind of organization of elements that are sort of compartmentalized within larger forms or shapes is common. Whether in an example of weaving, as you see here with this blanket, that would be worn over the shoulders by a person of importance in a clan or community, particularly during important occasions like rituals and ceremonies. The motif that you see here with its slightly bowed form on the bottom is supposed to be evocative of a diving whale. Within it as well, you can see references to ravens, another important animal associated with clan identity, folklore, but also some of the important stories associated with myth and legend of that region of the Pacific Northwest. So overall, you see a lot going on in this design, but at the same time, it's balanced, it's symmetrical, and therefore visually harmonious to the viewer. Something that we've seen before is Querco's painting, The Melancholy of Departure from 1914. This is a great example of asymmetry or asymmetrical balance. As I've talked about before with surreal art, they often embrace the irrational alternative realities, and whether it's through multiple perspective techniques, strange lighting, people who are missing from the composition, so it has this sort of abandoned quality to it, though an urban setting. What you find here is he is underscoring that sense of unease, that kind of otherworldly quality, by not having a central focus, instead putting the most prominent element, that fully illuminated ramp leading up to the upper deck here, on the far right, even clustering a strange group of green bananas here in the right foreground. So that's how one can break away from a symmetrical composition, embrace asymmetry to evoke something that conveys a totally different mood or atmosphere. Moving on to the next slide, rhythm is something to consider as well as a powerful ingredient to composition. The repetition of elements in intervals is how to achieve rhythm in art. It can be regular, alternating, or eccentric/irregular. So the example I'm using is called Churning of the Ocean Milk, Angkor Wat. It's an example of the art of Cambodia. It is a bas-relief or a sculptural relief. And what you find here is that all three forms of rhythm exist in this very piece. Think of rhythm almost like you would in terms of percussion. You can have a drum beat that's regular. You can have a drum beat that's alternating. You can also have something more jazzy, and you have more of eccentric or irregular drum beating, something that's a little bit more all over the place. That's what you can also experience visually. It's like a visual rhythm we're looking at with this particular example. So for instance, the pulling of this element that's describing the churning of the ocean milk in this scene is showing a multitude of people, and they all appear in a similar pose, in a similar rhythm, visual repeated appearance that one can interpret as a rhythm. And yet when you get to the larger fellow here, one can interpret that as an alternating rhythm. Or if we look at their legs, you'll see that the figure's right leg is bent at the knee, while their left leg is extended in this demonstration of exertion. Yet the legs alternate, right? As you move through each leg type, there is an alternating rhythm presented in the different legs. As you move from left to right, that's alternating. And then up above here, you might notice there are various additional beings who are dancing, but they occupy that space, that sphere, in different positions, up and down, diagonally, left and right, in a much more eccentric and irregular fashion. So that represents a rhythm that's irregular. So within one composition, you have three different descriptions of rhythm. Proportion and scale also comes to play when composition is being considered. Proportion, the size of one element or part in relation to another in a work of art, or the relationship of size of one part relative to the whole. So the larger figure here is an example of hierarchic scaling or hierarchy of scale. It's a way to emphasize the most important person in a composition. If they're big, take notice of them. This is a common way to emphasize people of importance, whether it's an Egyptian pharaoh, the Virgin Mary, or an example of modern art with an emphasis on a political message, for instance. Moving on to an example of architecture on our right, we've got something kind of local to us here in Los Angeles. Over in Venice, on the coast, is a very interesting entrance created by the team of Oldenburg and Van Bruggen. The binocular entrance to the Chiat building from 1985 to 91 is another example where you have something that is in large proportion compared to the traditional size of a pair of binoculars. Terms to consider for this one is scale. The size of something next to something else, that's considered normal. So if you look at the traffic on the boulevard that runs by the building, you can see, an average size car. And then, of course, you notice the ginormous scale of the binocular entrance by comparing the two. Emphasis is the result of one or more focal points in an artwork. So in this case, the idea is to have the binoculars be the focal point of the artwork. Or, turning to the other one on the left, you can use hierarchy of scale to create emphasis in a work of art as well. All right, thanks for joining me for this talk.